Hey guys, my name is Farek and I lost the ability to speak English. I meant I'm a game developer and I'd like to talk about games. It was a night like any other. I was browsing Reddit, reading about my favorite series, one of them being Darksiders, and I came across a specific comment which caused a minor brain aneurysm. But after that, it made me think, is Darksiders really suffering from identity crisis? For those who don't know, Darksiders is a series revolving around the four horsemen of the apocalypse and their adventures. And if you go on the internet, you might see stuff being thrown around that this series copy-pasted God of War, Zelda, Diablo, Dark Souls, and Diablo again. Like, what? I even parodied some of this stuff myself in one of my videos, but today I want to make things right. So let's go from Darksiders 1. People call it a God of War clone or a Zelda clone. However you want to put it. It's true that there are many elements that this game borrowed from those titles. I don't really want to spend time on the first game, except 2 points. I don't really care about this thing that a game is borrowing mechanics from another game. In my opinion, nor should you, or to be honest, I don't know how you're feeling about games implementing mechanics and design elements from other games. The games industry is built upon incremental improvements and incremental steps, like any other industry for that matter. But this game got a lot of shit for doing this at the time of release, which was 2010, but when some other company, Warner Brothers, tried to patent one of its systems for one of its games, Middle Earth, everyone saw what they were doing and gave them shit for that. Does that mean are we finally over the borrowing of game mechanics and game design or what? But anyhow, I'm going to show a diagram of how I think the core of the gameplay in Darksiders 1 was, based on the major pillars and experiences that the game delivers. And those are combat, platforming, and puzzle solving. Notice how I don't include the other layers of the game like presentation, controls, and customization and progression and other stuff. And with that, off to Darksiders 2. People call this one it's ripping off. Well, ripping off is a strong word. They said it's inspired by Diablo, and for semi-decent reasons. The game has an inventory system, full-blown itemization, and a talent tree. The game itself was split into 4 wars, or 5, which I want to ignore, each having a hub zone where you can buy items and customize your character to your liking. If that's the ground for calling it inspired by Diablo, sure, you can call it that. But calling Darksiders as a series lacking an identity, now that's a real stretch in my opinion. At least with the first 2 installments. Boys, you see, I played a lot of Diablo-like games, Grim Dawn and Torchlight, and I have played RPG games that implement itemization and customization, but the experience never matched to those of Diablo-likes in any capacity. And the reason for that is how much the designers actually try to make it a focal point of the game, how much your choices in the system matter, and how deep those systems are. Regarding the depths of the systems in Darksiders 2, the talent tree is really shallow. If you haven't played this game and I show you this picture of the talent tree, you might think that it has too many options, but the reality is there are 8 major abilities or so, and the other nodes in the tree are just upgrades to those abilities. Itemization is no different. Sure, there are multiple stats, many item slots, and different weapon types, but basically the items are your character stats filling it with different items. I know, but hold on. And those different items are following a very simple affix system. Whatever the item is, it has an affix that's included in the name of the item. Words like Marauder, Executioner, or words like that. There are some exceptions to the system, but it's mostly like that. Namely, the legendary items and the possessed weapons. Regarding your choices, again, it's really simple. You just have to focus on 1 or 2 things for your build. Sure, some of the choices might be more powerful, or the scaling of some of the choices might be different. But if you focus on 1 or 2 things, it really doesn't matter, even in the hardest difficulty. And I think I spoiled the focus of the game on these systems. The focus is not there. Game as a whole just checks if you're focusing on 1 or 2 things for your build. The game is not based around your gear and is still around the combat system that they implemented. Are you dodging, blocking, or parrying the stuff thrown at you? The only real gear check is how much damage you can do at a time. Maybe I'm wrong, but with full playthroughs of this game, the itemization and the talent tree was never and will never be the focus of this game for me, at least in my experience. Even on the first playthrough, sure, it did catch my eye, it did make me think for some time, but the time and thought that I put on the systems were never close to the other parts of the game. And I hope this diagram makes sense after my explanation. You know, it's still the same diagram, you're still juggling through the different core experiences of the game: platforming, puzzle solving, and combat. And whenever I think about the systems added in, it feels to me that it's just an evolution of the systems that came in Darksiders 1. The abilities in Darksiders 1 are now a talent tree that you can upgrade and mix and match. The different weapons are now items of their own. You could upgrade your weapons by simply using them in combat, and now it's possessed weapons, the weapons that you can upgrade by consuming other weapons. It sounds complicated, but it's really not. And the stats and the full itemization is just a very simple layer added on top, and the numbers game is not that important. And the intent of the developers were just different stories, so people can feel this character that they're playing with is theirs, and it's only theirs. It's played so it plays different to the next guy's character. And I did not just say that.
From what David Adams has said about the game, I'd gather that these Diablo RPG elements were to make players feel like they've made their own death, that each death would be different from everyone else's. Given the amount of depth to the stats, where you get them from and what they do, it's astounding how simple and easy to understand the process of upgrading them is. It's got that perfect balance between depth and simplicity.
The more detailed diagram looks something like this. Sure, it's a part of the game, but not a major factor, and depending on your experience with these systems, you might find it challenging or overwhelming, and you might be correct based on how you are feeling, and I'm not judging you for it. I sort of understand where you're coming from, and as human beings where we see the negative more than the positive, this might make people feel that this is way more important and taxing on the game experience. And to that I say, take an honest look to the time spent on the game. It might be another game, but for this video, keep it to Darksiders 2. Think about how important was the customization. The stat system, was it really that important or not? By the way, for the sake of my opinion, I think Darksiders 2 sort of nailed the intent of the developers. My other experiences were either the game makes you grind for items, constantly gear checking you, Assassin's Creed Odyssey, I'm not letting that game go, or it absolutely doesn't matter, but this game pretty much nailed its target in my opinion. But look at this, even nailing the hammer on this point. Just on the day that I was about to finalize the script, this popped up on Reddit. I mean, I get it, but I don't get this one, and I'm pointing this one exactly for a reason. I don't know what they're talking about. Sure, the game allows you to do it, the min-maxing and stuff, but there's a difference between requiring you to do it, like games like Diablo, and letting you do it. There was Crucible or Arena thing, I don't remember the name. It might require you to do it, spoiler alert, it really doesn't. But that's an optional challenge. You might say I'm only critiquing the guys that are going extreme and ignoring the other ones, and that's kind of my point. I think people are equating the extreme systems with the one that's in the game. Anyway, I'm gonna wrap up my talk about this game. Disagree with me in the comments. I mean, that's one of my hopes to spark a conversation about this topic. So let's go down there and come back for the rest of the video. And with that, we move to Darksiders Genesis. Yes, skipping Darksiders 3 for now. For this video I googled, is Darksiders Genesis a Diablo clone? And the results just point to the fact that how visual our judgments are. And I had trouble coming up with the English equivalent of a saying in my language, but I think all that glitters is not gold delivers a message. Oh look, the camera is top down, fixed around the character, it must be the same type of game. Based on this logic, these games must be different. No, it's just the same game, moving the camera into a different angle. I'm going to explain Darksiders Genesis like this. They took Darksiders 1, changed the camera angle, touched up the controls so it makes sense for the new camera system, add a new character, and cook the game. Now we have Darksiders Genesis. The game feels more like Darksiders 1 than anything else. Yeah, that comment that caused a brain aneurysm was about Darksiders Genesis, saying it's a Diablo clone. If you have played it, you know it's nothing like Diablo. Fine, you don't want to trust me, Google the same thing and read or watch a video. By the way, the diagram looks like this. The control and presentation of the game did not change the core experiences. And with that, we have this final collection of diagrams, and I add Darksiders 3 to the equation. So, if you look at this closely and pay attention, oh, for fuck's sake, the combat is different. You gotta be colorblind not to see it. For this title, they went for Soulsborne combat system. No, this isn't about how good or bad the combat system is, or how journalists can't play these games, or about my opinion on how good or bad the change is. I'm just here to say this is a fundamental change of the experiences delivered by the game and how there was an identity, and this change broke it. It's 1/3 of the game. The other games were not about punishing you for not doing every phase of each enemy and dealing with dying multiple times. They were much more relaxed, even on the hardest difficulties for other games. So this needs a little bit more explanation. Even though the general goal of the game design is the same, puzzles, platforming, and combat, the combat part of the game is much more punishing. And I think in the eyes of the player, because you are dying multiple times and there is no checkpoints and the respawn points are somewhat ungenerous compared to the other games, this makes the combat feel even more central to the game, even though it might be not if someone tallies the total enemy counters in each game and see if the total number is somewhat equal. But because it's a Soulsborne game, you feel it's taking much more time than normal. And the response from the player base was very different this time, or at least that's how I feel. But the conversation was caught up in that Darksiders were always changing their formula, but at the same time, I think everyone understood that this is a drastic change from the series. And when I say everyone, I mean everyone. Even the developers of the game added in the combat system more like the other titles. But this thing happened anyway. And I didn't really see this thought process or talking point presented on the internet, so I went,
fine, I'll do it myself.
And about the other systems added in, I think they don't change the game that much. They implemented the world of the game like Metroidvania games. Yeah, I don't really think that qualifies as a core experience. I didn't fully play Darksiders 3, but from what I read, the Metroidvania shell was mostly a miss. And yeah, I think it's a shell, nothing more to categorically change the game as a whole in terms of experiences delivered by the game. Anyway, what's the conclusion here? You know, when I was writing the script for this video, I really thought about this. I mean, one conclusion is the title of this video, but I think that's already handled. But there are two major points that I want to bring up. One that I got from writing the script itself. When I was writing about Darksiders 2, I realized how different backgrounds of players might lead to different responses or experiences regarding the customization systems in Darksiders 2 and how subjective it can be. But I really think the nuance was lost. From the conversations, I found two major camps. Even they loved it or they hated it, I didn't see anyone say that this is not a fundamental change of the game design. You know, I'm following the other game design book, and one of the first things that's in the book is that games are a way to deliver experiences. Now I hope it makes sense how I went on about explaining the games. When I look at the Darksiders as a series, except the third installment, I think of the same cakes of experience with different icings on it. Sure, you might not like one certain icing, but I still think it must be discussed if it's the same cake or not, or it's just a different icing. And the other point that I'm not really sure about, I borrowed this from Pirate Software.
If you have a video game, and that video game has all the things that you like, except for this one little thing, the game is trash, downvote, bad, awful developer. And that's the thing that I think is really interesting, is because that sort of infinite choice, where you can select the perfect game, means that when you have one thing that's missing, well then it's awful. It doesn't matter anymore, because I could find something else.
When games became so popular and many different games were made, we became more picky about them. I don't really know if this is a valid argument about this certain topic. I think this is the same effect happening in metal genre as well. So many subgenres. Never mind, off topic. But I feel this effect got to the series in the wrong places. Yet when it actually happened in the fundamental aspects of the game in Darksiders 3, it went haywire. I really don't know about the ending of this video and what message I want to leave you with, except that let's think more critically about stuff and you shouldn't believe everything on the internet. But I made a video out of it, so yay. Thank you for watching, subscribe and all of that stuff. That would help a lot because AI made videos are basically spamming YouTube and you subscribing if you like the content, and pushing that notification bell is really helpful for me. So do that if you want, and what you might call it. And that's why I lost the ability to speak English. Bye.